anyway, back to the story that I'm about to introduce, which was such a beautiful portrayal of, when everything goes awry, you should say. What I love about Mercedes' story is it sort of takes you on this journey that I was riveted on with the whole entire time. And I was recently talking to a boxer about birth, and she said, I kind of imagine birth to be like boxing, when every time I go get ready for a match, I have all these plans of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to act and all these moves I'm going to make. And all that goes out the door as soon as you get punched in the face. And I thought that was a beautiful metaphor for this story, which made me laugh. It expressed the real rawness and emotion of when things don't go the way you planned. And I, being someone who have been with someone going through the changes when the plan changes, I thought it was a really great also emotional journey and understanding of the partner, the caregiver, and definitely the woman involved. So thank you for that story, and I'll give it to Mercedes to share with us.
Sarah, thank you. That was the perfect introduction and the perfect metaphor, absolutely. It's 3 a.m. and I'm wrapped in a blanket, looking out the front window of our Toronto bungalow. My body mirrors the full pink moon, revealing her magnificence through the gently swaying branches of the trees, standing proudly on our lawn. This lunar phase carries the powerful energy of rebirth and inspires transformation and recognition that we are cyclic beings in conjunction with nature. Ah, of course, I whispered to the moon. She was waiting for you. How poetic, my Luna. Today marks 2 weeks past her expected date of arrival. The house is quiet. I peek into the bedroom to see my husband TJ comfortably cuddled up with our little dog Toby. The floor squeaks as my swollen feet slowly move into Luna's nursery. Her crib is covered in sheets freshly washed by my mom and adorned with a macrame banner handmade by one of our closest friends. On the floor is a plastic blue bin, filled to the brim with every suggested item on the checklist from my midwife. 8 towels, check. 4 receiving blankets, check. 2 bowls, check. A metal baking sheet, check. My diaper bag, however, is practically empty. This is a home birth. I have read Ina May's Spiritual Midwifery, and I am ready for initiation into the Badass Women Who've Birthed Their Babies Naturally Club. I hold this idea like a badge of honor I will soon be wearing. This isn't that bad, I tell TJ, as he makes coffee with a subtle jitter in his hands. Soon my doula Asma arrives, wide-eyed, calm, and genuinely excited to be here. Asma shares the birth stories of her 2 children as I bounce on an oversized exercise ball. I exhale in revelation of the honor it is to have Asma here supporting me with real compassion and sisterhood. I rest, I bathe, I bounce, I walk, I rest, I snack. Over the next 24 hours, the pain increases steadily. I eventually surrender and wrap my body around a pile of pillows in agony. My newly arrived midwife, Sarah, sits at the foot of my bed. She explains that because my water hasn't broken, I can choose to have her break it or wait. She tells me it could take anywhere from a few hours to another day or 2, and gently warns that if she breaks my water, the pain will increase rapidly. I laugh because worse than this simply is not possible. I ask to see what she'll put inside me to break my water. It looks like one of those things my grandparents used to put their shoes on. Okay, let's do it, I say. Then, like a transport truck in a highway collision, it happens. This must be the worst pain a human can maybe survive. I get back on my hands and knees. My voice generates sounds that derive from deeper than the depth of my womanhood. They were no longer mine, they were that of an animal awoken within. I look up toward my bedroom door between excruciating surges. My husband stands there, and he too has transformed. From a broad 6-foot man to a 6-year-old boy, terrified, shaking, his ocean eyes puffy and red, his shirt soaked from tears, he watches me desperately, wanting to take my pain away. Babe, I say as I grab his head and pull him toward me. This is hard and I'm scared too, but I'm okay. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm okay. I'm going to give birth to our daughter. A fire of gratitude ignites in my soul. He isn't pretending to hold it together. He's just there, terrified, trusting me, loving me. Sarah comes in for another checkup, I assume because the sounds coming out of me have deepened once again. She's gentle and quiet yet serious, like the CEO of my vagina hosting a very important meeting. She tells me I'm 9 centimeters dilated and that Lou's head seems to have dropped. This is it. I call upon my courage to prepare my body for the next stage of labor. And whoa, I pause. The pain has disappeared. Wait, what? How? I lie to Asma. I tell her my surgeries are still terrible, and I exaggerate my moans to match what they were before. Sarah investigates. Then I watch as she places her hand gently on mine. Mercedes, your cervix has closed, and you are 3 centimeters dilated. I don't want to believe her, but my body already knew. I pull my sweat-drenched, spaghetti-strap dress over my head and step into a lukewarm shower. As the water pours over my body, I feel physically, emotionally, and spiritually depleted. There's nothing left in me except a big ball of human that I am incapable of birthing. I cry. I cry so hard that the stream of water coming from the faucet seems to merge with my tears. After what feels like a lifetime, I catch my breath and pray. Universe, God, whoever or whatever you are, please send help. I crawl into bed and try to sleep for the first time in 2 days. The clock says 1 p.m., but I don't know what day it is. My contractions are a few minutes apart and becoming more and more difficult to manage. For the first time, I'm really scared. My gut is speaking to me clearly. I know it's time to go to the hospital. I'm clinging to the hurtful backlash I felt from the outside world when I first decided to have a home birth. My ego boldly argues, if you go, you prove them right. My soul whispers adamantly, go to the hospital. I crawl into the back of our green Civic, Yolanda the Honda. TJ is not crying. He has a job to do, and helping me is where TJ thrives. I feel his confidence as he gets behind the wheel. He safely swerves and speeds through the back roads, repeating, "You're doing great, babe," just like they do in the movies. I'm on my hands and knees, exploding with long, deep cries of distress. I'm using swear words I didn't know were in my vocabulary. I can no longer recognize where one ends and the other begins. It's just one long, vicious feeling beginning in my uterus and shooting through my entire body and beyond. We get to St. Joseph's Hospital. I climb into the sterile bed and cry to my midwife. It's too bright and I'm too tired. Then I mutter through tears, I think I need an epidural. I don't think my body can handle it anymore. I'm sorry, I say, I'm sorry I can't do it. In this moment, asking for an epidural means failure. Sarah tells me I am doing it and that I'm incredibly strong and brave. I don't believe her. I've been given a gas mask, and this is my new most favorite invention in the entire history of the world. I'm convinced that TJ and I are part of a secret society, and he can hear my thoughts as I tap my nose and raise my eyebrows repeatedly at him. I feel myself floating above my body. I can still feel the pain, but it feels like someone else's. This is better than sex. Sarah's dark eyes pop up from between my legs. Mercedes, she says, with a mildly excited tone, I can see her head. Are you ready to push? The epidural hasn't shown up. I feel everything as hands reach inside me to pull Luna down. Hands, 2 hands and a baby, all inside me. I'm pushing and they're pulling and it's happening. Then suddenly a familiar nothing. No Luna. Just a half dozen women, when did they multiply, standing around looking at my vagina. Some holding my legs, some writing things down, some just watching me. I look at the huge red and black digital clock in the corner of the room. I can't recall what numbers were there earlier, but I know for sure that time has passed. A tiered cart filled with medical instruments pushed by a slender, serious-looking man rolls past me. I decide immediately that he is mean and terrible. I do not like that I need what he is preparing to stick into my spine. I sit with my legs dangling off the side of the hospital bed. My favorite intern midwife, Caitlin, senses my vulnerability and invites me to wrap my arms around her. With my head on her chest, she strokes my hair and gently explains what will happen next. A green-eyed nurse with a tiny frame and frizzy red hair adjusts the needle taped to my skin. I can still feel everything. Can you make it so I feel less? I plead. Yes, I will try. And just like that, the pain has gone from 100 out of 10 to 40 out of 10. The doctor's here, she says quietly. The what? I think to myself. I did not sign up for any doctor. I don't even want to be here. I hate And my thought was interrupted by a vivacious, dark-haired woman in scrubs. She oozes confidence, bridging on arrogance, and I like it. Hello, love. I'm Dr. Maria. Let's meet this baby, shall we? Luna's heart rate is dropping, and so is mine. Dr. Maria is between my knees, holding large metal forceps as midwives grasp my bent legs. TJ stands behind them and Asma behind him. The visceral support I'm feeling from each human in this room is palpable. Somehow this sensation expands, and I'm held by every female in the entire history of existence who has given birth before this moment. This powerful force shifts me to laser-sharp focus. I push with every ounce of strength I have as Dr. Maria pulls until finally, Luna. The biggest little hands stretch toward me and our deep brown eyes lock for the first time. She looks like my dad, I cry. I feel each stitch carefully being sewn as Dr. Maria casually says something about next time. We make a $10 bet that there will be no next time. Asma takes photos of Luna's first moments, and I ask repeatedly for my mom and family. I'm told to wait as my placenta has not made her debut yet. Seriously? What feels like a lifetime later, I push out the complex organ that allowed my daughter to grow inside me. It's so big that it rips my stitches, but at this point, nothing surprises me. I request that my 6-year-old niece, Elia, be allowed in the room first. Caitlin asks Elia to help check Luna's heartbeat, and I'm happy that she feels special. I hold my mom's hand while Luna lays on me. It feels so natural that I'm certain we've been together for lifetimes. Happy birthday, my love, I say quietly into her ear. It's been 65 hours since the subtle surge that woke me up. None of this is what I expected, planned for, or dreamed of. It is nothing like the stories I read, but it is mine. And this is the beginning of the greatest adventure, the deepest love affair, and the most incredible journey of my life. That is Luna Rising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. That just constant chills, just constant chills.
We're
I've
both
read
crying.
crying. Just thank you. It's just such a beautiful story. I love the humor in it. I love the way that it's just every moment is brought to life. We're kind of with you on all the turns. Do you want to just share very quickly kind of what compelled you to write this story, and if you had written it before this contest, or if this was what catalyzed you writing it?
Well, I had been obsessed with birth stories throughout my pregnancy. I had a pregnancy. I did not have a good pregnancy, and so I wasn't up very much. So I like deep dove into birth stories, and I was just reading everything I could get my hands on, watching everything I could get my hands on, and I had this like birth story for myself, literally written before I was like writing notes about it, how it was going to be before I even had Luna. And of course, it was like this very noble birth of like, that was nothing like my birth. But I had been wanting to write it for a long time, and I had just been afraid. And then my doula sent me this, and it prompted me to write it, sent me this contest. So I'm so grateful that you put this together, because I'm not sure if I would have had the courage to get it on paper if you hadn't. So I'm extremely grateful for that.
I'm really, really glad. And I mean, we are so grateful. I mean, your story just showcases your intense bravery, like your sort of both instinctual knowledge as well as, you know, the ways you had to roll the punches. So thank you. Thank you for writing it and for being here with us today. We really, really appreciate it, Mercedes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're now going to segue to the next birth story that we will be sharing. This is the second place winner by Laurie Sebastiani. And we have the pleasure of Leanne Lieberman, who is a published writer and one of our esteemed judges, who is going to introduce this story. So Leanne.
Thanks.
You're good now. Oh, no, you're not. Sorry. You're on mute. All right, we got it.
All right, great. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Excellent. Jose, thanks for writing that you were crying too, so that I feel like I'm not the only one. I've read all these stories before, but it's so much more emotional to hear them. I'm really excited to be introducing Laurie Sebastiani's story, Cutting Ties and Letting Go. I love the story for personal reasons, and then also because of all the great things that I did. So the judges and I found that it was a well-crafted and honest portrayal of fertility, pregnancy, and new motherhood. We thought that the author had clearly thought of her audience and how to present and structure her story. We thought that the author had spent some time both processing her experiences and thinking about how to present them as a narrative. I also really liked how there was a lot of development in the story, from expectation to some disappointment to a final resolution. And it really showed a lot of physical and mental and spiritual growth. Lastly, we found the story to be really well written with good attention to word choice and detail and a killer final sentence. I actually wanted to quote the final sentence myself, but I thought we would let the author do it herself. And then lastly, I wanted to say that I've never written about my own birth story, but a lot of the struggles with fertility in the story really resonated for me. And it made me think that maybe I should sit back, even though it's like 15 years ago and my kids are big, that maybe I need to do some processing about my own birth story and fertility challenges. So Laurie, we're looking forward to hearing you read.
Oh, thank you, Leanne. That was so lovely. That meant so much to hear you say those things. So thank you so much. And thank you to the Doula Support Foundation for this initiative. I think it's wonderful. And I loved how all the chosen stories talked about totally different birth processes. And oh, a little shout out to Kingston. I lived in Kingston for 5 years when I was a student back in the mid-90s. So yeah, love me some Kingston. When I first heard about the contest, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write about my episiotomy. I'm a writer. I'm a teacher as well, and I'm a writer. And for me, writing is a way to understand major life events, whether they're positive or negative. And every time I write about something that happened to me, I always find out something new, because when I'm living it, obviously, I'm just concentrating on either enjoying it or surviving it. So that this story allowed me to do that. So I'm so honored that it was chosen, and I hope that it resonates with readers. And what I really learned about having an episiotomy was that I was really left vulnerable during the birthing process, because I put so much faith in my RE, reproductive endocrinologist turned OB. And I really wanted it to be a full circle moment. Like, it had taken my husband and I over 7 years to become pregnant. I was 37, the first time mother, and it was over multiple IVF failures. So this was the one. And we wanted him to be there. There's so much pain. Out of so much pain came so much joy. And it was, the birth was joyful, but it had hiccups, and I had to write about those hiccups. And so that's where I'll begin my story, right after the birth. And my story was called Cutting Ties and Letting Go. There is one word that characterized the days and weeks after the delivery of my first child: pain. I couldn't sit, walk, or move in any way without feeling a pulsating ache in the most intimate part of my body. Nurses were changing shifts every 12 hours, telling me to sit up and walk around. My small room was constantly filling and emptying of well-meaning family members and friends. Emotional pain soon followed, as I found breastfeeding next to impossible. The first 24 hours, my son needed little nourishment, but as his appetite grew, my inability to relax and ignore the pain of my episiotomy prevented any real progress. I asked the nurse for stronger medication than the extra strength ibuprofen and acetaminophen I was interchanging every 4 hours, but she told me it was doctor's orders. Anything stronger would be incompatible with breastfeeding. My husband fed him his first bottle of formula as I looked on from the bed, trying to ignore the large rock in my chest. During one of my physical exams, a nurse told me my incision was healing beautifully. But I'm in so much pain, I said. She nodded. It's a small incision, but he cut through 4 layers of tissue. That's why you feel it so much. After 3 days of regular sitz baths and squirt bottle cleanings, we left the hospital with a thriving newborn. What followed was intense guilt and depression over the inability to push through the pain of my episiotomy and breastfeed my son. One night while my parents were visiting, I quietly escaped to the nursery and tried to put him to the breast. He struggled to latch and began to wail. My mother entered the room with a small bottle of formula and passed it to me. As the tears streamed down my cheek, she asked what was wrong. I'm a failure, I said. I couldn't feed him with my body. Look at him, she urged. I looked down at my hard-fought baby with his round face, wide eyes, and pink cheeks. How can anyone who made him be a failure? In psychology, the term transference refers to the redirection of a patient's feelings for a significant person to the therapist or doctor. When the feelings are overly positive, it is called God syndrome. This occurs when the doctor is overvalued and becomes a type of God in the eyes of the patient. I didn't think of my RE as a God, but in my mind, he was a miracle worker. This allowed me to put all my trust in him. The medical community had come through when I needed it the most. How could it possibly lead me astray? The emotional wound left by my episiotomy took much longer to heal than the physical one. Eventually, I shifted my thinking, which allowed me to put more faith in myself than any medical professional. Now it was my turn to do the cutting. When I turned 39, my husband and I were ready to try for baby number 2. Knowing that time was not on our side, we switched doctors. I began treatments in a clinic with a higher than average success rate for women over 37 who hoped to use their own eggs. To our delight, I became pregnant after 4 months. This time, when my RE asked me if I had any preference for my obstetrical care, I was prepared. I asked to be referred to a female team of obstetricians in Hamilton who rarely performed episiotomies except in very particular cases. With my second son, I only pushed for 20 minutes and had 2 surface tears that I barely noticed. His birth prompted further reflection that even though I may not have had an episiotomy if I had given birth at another hospital with a different doctor, it was okay. I choose to be gentle with myself, knowing that vulnerability was a logical state for me to be in after an almost 8-year struggle to become pregnant. I'm glad I got a second chance at giving birth. My first time didn't turn out quite as I hoped it would, but it put in motion the long process of learning to have faith in an imperfect body. It's still a work in progress, but I realize that I can be grateful to others and self-trusting at the same time. Today, I choose to see the divine in a mind that can decide for itself and a body that can work miracles. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm just so grateful that you shared your story. I mean, I'm grateful that it was a sort of a cathartic discovery process for you, but one of the things that I just really appreciate about your story, and we had someone who shared not a similar story, of course, but sort of another, fertility and then postpartum struggles story in last year's, was just how important it is that we talk about and we name that, sometimes even if you've had many struggles in trying to get pregnant, that doesn't necessarily mean that, therefore you'll just want it all the more and it'll all be smooth, and that there can be so many more hiccups and so much more harsh self-talk that can be so debilitating. And so I really loved the way that you weaved in your kind of the way that you were choosing to be gentle with yourself and your decisions about how to engage with this story and this processing. It was so real and just incredibly heartwarming despite the struggle. So thank you. Are there any kind of final thoughts or reflections you want to share about your experience of writing this, or anything?
It really, I think I've been in the process of thinking about it. My son is 8 now, for the last 8 years, but I think putting it to paper, pen and paper, I always write my first drafts that way, but putting it to pen and paper, it really, I forgave myself. I forgave myself for maybe not asking enough questions ahead of my birth, for thinking that, doctors are wonderful people, don't get me wrong, we need them, but I have a voice too, and I got that with my second son, and I'm so grateful. But writing the story really, I forgave myself for all of it.
Good, as you should. I mean, one of the things that we often talk about with our clients is, it's not good enough healthy mom and healthy baby. Like, regardless of what happened, you have to have a space to grieve and to process whatever happened, especially if it wasn't what you expected, and especially if then afterwards breastfeeding and some of these other elements is a challenge. You're already, at your kind of lowest energy level in a lot of ways, and then to struggle with that is a huge amount of strength and resilience just to make it through. And I just love the way that you brought that to realness for people to be able to witness.
And I just want to say one more thing. if there's any pregnant people out there and medical professionals, believe women when they say they're in pain. One thing that struck me having an episiotomy was I found the pain debilitating. And I know that I had friends and siblings who'd had C-sections and they were given stronger drugs, even though they were breastfeeding. So yeah, believe women when they say they're in a lot of pain. So
thank you for saying that. And I think it's also so important to name that also in terms of some of the unfortunate structural racism that we see in hospitals, that unfortunately there is an unconscious bias a lot of times that people of color are not experiencing the same level of pain. And so they often are left to suffer, sometimes even more than non-Black folks. And so I think it's such an important thing to honor. You know, when someone
thank you.
Especially, you know, especially right after baby's been born. I definitely know that with my second, I was done. My ability to experience pain was over, and then the stitching just made me want to throw something, leave the room, leave the body.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it is my pleasure now for us to turn to our first place winner. This is Ashley Lightfoot from Squamish, BC, and her story is called Birth of the Tiger. And I am very grateful to have Ying Li, who is another one of our published writers and esteemed judges, who is going to introduce this story. So over to you, Ying.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I have the pleasure of introducing Ashley Lightfoot. Her essay, Birth of the Tiger, was the judge's unanimous choice for first place in this year's contest. And there's so many lovely things that I could say about this essay. I'll just pick a few. In the opening lines, Ashley frames her birth story using the clinical voice of her medical notes. And it's a choice that stands in contrast to the intimate tone that she develops thereafter. She tells her story with assurance and a sense of growing elation that we, as her readers, get to share. She builds suspense very effectively, acknowledging the division between the brain and the body and the difference between what a person expects and what actually happens. It's a bit of a theme when you write about birth, I guess, but also very much unique and individual in this particular telling. She also observes with power and wit the fact that memory is treacherous, especially at such an intense time, physically and emotionally. And the ending shifts into a mode that is as tender and beautiful as the story as a whole. As a reader, I am grateful to Ashley for sharing these intimate and inspiring hours from her experience. And the birth of the tiger is indeed a triumph. So I will now turn things over to Ashley. Thank you so much.
Wow, thanks. Is this thing on? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic.
So I'm going to spend a bit of time answering the questions that we were given about why we write or why we write birth stories. And then I'll do just a few excerpts from the story. And if you want to see or read the rest of it, you can go on to the Doula Support Foundation website. Maybe make a donation while you're there, right? So I write in general. I've been keeping a journal, like I'm just compelled to keep a journal for as long as I can remember. And I feel like it's because I have very big feelings and a very bad memory. So I feel like I need to keep the feeling. And sometimes I reread stuff and it's like, it never happened. Like it was wiped from my memory completely. So it's nice to be able to come back onto the feeling. And I wrote The Birth of the Tiger. He was born in April and we were just about to leave for a Christmas vacation, and there's nothing like the stress of leaving somewhere and packing up a whole family to make you tie up loose ends. So perhaps that is part of why it ends up being a bit of a stream of consciousness experience, because it was the conditions that I was writing it in as well. As far as writing birth stories, I am a really private person generally, if you can believe it, because the story shares some pretty intimate stuff. So I tend to be really private unless it's about birth. In my first pregnancy, I was really into Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and I found the stories in there to be really helpful for trying to visualize. So I almost feel like it's a duty to write birth stories. I consider them scientific because we already know that maternity is a bit of a different medical animal, and the way that a birther's experience contributes to the interplay of hormones, which in turn contributes so much to the flow of birth and to the outcomes. I feel it's an area of science and medicine where I think that if we were to study birthers' stories to the point where we have the findings have an influence on maternity care, we would be able to do a great service to families. And kind of like Jose said at the beginning, that they have the ability to change the world and to change the culture. So yeah, that's what compelled me to write. And when I heard about this contest, I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's cut it down and submit. So thank you for that opportunity. And here goes nothing. I'm just gonna read some excerpts. So again, you can read the whole thing on the site. I was ready. I was excited. My first birth was long at home in water. Babe had been looking up and cocked to one side, a synclitic brow presentation. I felt invincible afterwards. The contractions were so intense, the duration so exhausting. I had caressed the face of the Creator. I was waiting for that again, excited for hormones to send me back to space, back to labor land. I knew that second labors were generally much faster, but I didn't want to rely on it. My strategy was to mentally prepare for it to be more grueling than the first, and if it was similar or easier, good. Gravy. It's 7 p.m., contracting, but eating. I can't be that far along if I'm eating. The world seems pretty normal, not going inward at all. I request a doula visit. It's 8 p.m. and our kiddo is going to bed. We talk until 8:30. I'm talking through contractions. The mood is light. Would you like me to set up the birth pool? She asks. Well, I ponder. The husband will want something to do, and I don't want to be a watched pot. So hang out at your friend's place, and we'll call you. I'm going to go have a shower. In that room right there. The husband is putting our eldest to bed, so I text him an outline of tasks with perfect spelling and grammar. So of course I'm nowhere near birthing. I go to the bathroom, not only to try to have a shower, but in the hopes of making some bowel room too. I mean, that's what you do, right? You poop and you puke and eventually a baby comes out. Or at least that's what happened last time. I turn the shower on, but can't make it in. I'm floored by pain, gripping the side of the bathtub. Then an excruciating stab on my left side puts me on all fours. I still don't get it. I'm far too conscious. Back from the bedtime duties, the husband walks in, surveys, and wonders if I should get in the tub. I don't think I'll be able to get out again. I need to get to the bed. And where's my water bottle? I get into bed, water bottle in hand, and quickly realize that it's hard for me to put the cap back on. I'm gonna need someone to feed me through a straw soon. Finally, a sign that makes me realize I'm in a later stage of labor. To ease my discomfort, I move to side lying on my right side. I instruct the husband to inflate the birth pool, and soon after he leaves the room, the heavy-duty, super loud hum of the electric air inflator whirs up. It's the perfect muffle to the sudden mega push that breaks my waters and moves the tiger's head right down with immense pressure. Oh, and also voids my bowels quite prodigiously at that. During that push, I had screamed like I was being straight up murdered. Thank you, ambient air pump noise, for helping me get it all out. It was primal, delicious, hilarious. Noticing the open window, I muse about what the neighbors can hear and whether police services have been dispatched. And also in that moment, I wonder, why am I still so freaking with it? Where's my cosmic trip to search for life's ultimate truths? Then again, my body has taken over enough that speaking is not easy for me. I had been in my alpha brain, but I was going down fast. The husband walks in and basically sees that I have pooed myself. This is his major concern. So he grabs a towel and starts cleaning that up, bless him. The birth is now coming fast and furious, and I'm having some extreme hormone downloading, adrenaline spikes, hours rolled into minutes. And all I can really say is, baby, baby. He thinks, funny, she doesn't usually call me baby. And then he takes a closer look and exclaims, is that hair? Not having signed up for this, he says, I'm paging the midwives. And I'm too caught up to communicate my feelings, which at the time are, no, don't leave. I could kind of use you right now. Another huge push takes me over. There's a lot of pressure, and I think this is it. So I put my hand on my perineum and pop, baby's head is out. Husband's yelling into the phone, we have a head, we have a baby. It's 9:15, 45 minutes from when I sent my doula packing. He hangs up and comes over, surveying his second-born's head sticking out of me. It's blue, he says. That's okay, I say. Husband says, I think it's trying to say something. I think you need to push the rest of it out. All right, and I'll read the very last part as well that Ying touched on too. Over the next few days, life will return to its mundane tasks, with the 24/7 task of infant care piled on top, but not without some transcendent moments of bliss. My first postpartum was, like many, awash with this extraordinary newness, as well as a somewhat terrifying and hyper-alert sense of responsibility. This time around, I found moments where I felt bathed in the elementary particles of bonding. The husband was home keeping house, the neighbors brought food and didn't linger, and even some home visit acupuncture to ease my post-labor pains. With all of that beautiful support, I was left to do the most important work, and relaxed enough to receive the pure spiritual simplicity of love between baby and birther. The husband and I still sit back sometimes and start debriefing on that night. We pull the memory out as one would an after-dinner treat from the freezer. You manifested that, he says. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. I just kind of want you to, yeah, I just want you to like read it over and over again. And yeah, that last part, I mean, all of us, we spoke about that, the after dinner treat, it's just gorgeous. So thank you so much for putting pen to paper, and thank you so much for sharing it. And even the way that you read it is just brings it all. And I just love the way you call the husband. Like, it's just such a great way of adding additional caricature. Are there any final kind of words or reflections? Like, have you read this much out loud to anyone? Has it been different to kind of do that as opposed to writing it as someone who's a private person, or kind of anything you?
Yeah, I say, like, part of the story that I've told myself is, yeah, I'm a writer, not a talker. So, you know, try something new. It's time to be more of a talker. So yeah, again, thanks for that opportunity.
Well, you did it beautifully. So thank you so much again for being here, and congratulations again, Ashley. And congratulations to all of the first, second, and third place winners of our birth story contest. Because we had so many amazing stories, and you know, obviously people are welcome to sign off if they'd like to, but I'm hoping that people are still wanting to be here for the second part of this. We're going to wrap up before 5. But what we now have is some of the other amazing finalists from the birth story contest who are willing to be here and share and provide kind of a few excerpts from their story as well. So I'd like to segue to those. We've got 4 coming up. So hopefully, if you've already gotten a taste of listening to these 3 stories, you are hooked and here for the rest of it. And then of course we have Jen Grant singing at the end. So I'd now like to turn over to Janelle Barr, who is going to introduce, she was our 2019 Birth Story Contest winner, and she was one of the readers for the Birth Story Contest this year. Hello, Janelle. And I'd like to go ahead and send it over to you, and you will introduce Surprise Baby by Susan Flanagan.
Hey guys. Yeah, so actually my name's Janelle Connor. I just wanted to clarify, just in case it came up as Janelle Barr. That's
sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, I'm so excited to be a part of reading all these beautiful stories. I just had a baby just under 4 months ago. So it's been quite an emotional journey for me to kind of read through all these stories and kind of reflect on my own story. And there's so many parts in each story that I connect with. And I just love that women are just here supporting women and kind of changing that narrative for a positive birth story experience, because I think that there's so many negative stories out there, and when women first get pregnant, that's the ones that they hear. So I think that this is amazing, and I appreciate Doula Support Foundation for putting this on. So I'm here to present Susan Flanagan. I read Surprise Baby. Now, Susan is from St. John's, Newfoundland, so we're Canadian bubble mates, I guess. Her story is filled with humor. I loved it. I loved how she told her story, and honestly, she kind of made having 5 babies seem very possible. And she, she had her birth of her 5th baby 15 years after she had her first. So it was definitely a surprise. And yeah, I think that this story kind of, well, just like her humor can kind of connect with anyone, and I encourage everyone to go read it because it's a really nice, lighthearted story. Hi, Susan.
You are on mute still, Susan.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Go for it. And I'll go ahead and add the pictures in the second part.
So thank you to all you doulas. You're superstars from Africa to Canada, everywhere. Anyone in labor can appreciate any help that they can get. So my name is Susan Flanagan, and I'm a mother of 5 in St. John's, Newfoundland. My husband and I had 4 children in just over 5 years. After the 4th, he panicked a little bit and he went and got snipped. So this excerpt I'm going to recount is what happened 9 years later. Surprise, baby. I had disregarded all the signs, obvious signs like urging whenever something came in contact with my throat, like tossing olives into my gullet as if they were popcorn, like night sweats, or falling asleep on my neighbor's couch while her visiting mother was in mid-sentence. Even when my legs started collapsing out from under me and I ended up in a sports medicine doctor's office, I was in denial. Have you ever experienced sciatica before, he asked. Only in pregnancy, I answered, but I can't be pregnant. My husband had a vasectomy 9 years ago. Famous last words. The young sports doctor pulled out a prescription pad and wrote me a requisition for an x-ray. Before I give you this, tell me the date of your last menstruation, he said. Come to think of it, I had skipped my last monthlies, but there was a valid reason. I was preparing to sell our house and move our family across the country. That was why I was suffering from night sweats and severe fatigue. Perhaps I had done something to the sciatic nerve while packing boxes. The good doctor nodded sagely. You need to do a pregnancy test before you can have an x-ray. I stopped by the supermarket on the way home for a tub of olives and a pregnancy kit. I waited until early the next morning. The children were asleep and my husband had left at 6. I was all alone when I peed on the stick. I didn't have to wait long for a result. Almost immediately, the moist strip nestled in the plastic bar lit up the neighborhood. Holy mother, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. It's true, I always did want 5 children. I just didn't imagine one coming 15 years after the first. My husband had always been proud of his vasectomy, comparing his discomfort to the 4 anesthesia-less childbirths I had experienced. The surgeon had told him that there was no turning back. Once done, the vasectomy could not be reversed. The aggressive technique involved cutting out 2 full inches of sperm tunnel and clamping the ends with titanium clips. He even cauterized the sides for good measure. Good measure or not, I had to let Titanium Man know that his 40-year-old wife was expecting. He was on his morning commute when he picked up the call. He had to pull over. This was not light news. Maybe the test was wrong, he suggested. If this thing had bells, there'd be no one asleep within a 10-mile radius, I said. Our family doctor was of the same mind as my husband. Could it be someone else's, he asked. At this time in our married lives, my husband was on his 2nd year of a corporate MBA program for which he, along with many other professionals, left their families for regularly scheduled overnights at the Vancouver Delta. I was a stay-at-home writer, ferrying our 4 very young children through Bangkok-style traffic to ice hockey and dance. If anyone in this couple was going to find time to get lucky, it was not me. So I decided to concentrate on the getting pregnant rather than the actual birth process. After this, I prepared my 4 children and myself to move back to Newfoundland from British Columbia. My husband had gone ahead because his work started. We drove home through the States. I have lovely maternity pictures of me at Mount Rushmore. Once we arrived home, word spread that I was pregnant again, and fear swept through all the vasectomy men in St. John's, and they scurried to get retested. But who gets tested 9 years later? Our family doctor, Patrick O'Shea, who had been with us for 3 of the 4 of our first children's births, said he'd love to assist once again. He has helped deliver more than 2,000 babies over the course of his career. And Declan D. Brian Flanagan came on November 13th, our 15th wedding anniversary. He was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, descended testicles. It was harder giving birth in my 40s than in my 20s, but at least I knew what I was in for. And when the 4 older children met their new sibling, they were completely smitten. And Declan thinks that he is an only child of 6 parents. That's it.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry. I just realized I didn't share these pictures. I will just quick put these pictures up so that everyone can enjoy your.
Yes. So that's it. My 15th wedding anniversary picture. And that's him after. He's getting love. Here he is. And that's the others.
Yeah.
That was our Christmas card that first year.
That's amazing. Was he crawling at like 4 months because he needed to hurry up and get with his siblings?
He was so advanced. My first guy was a blob right up until he was past a year old and hardly rolled over. He had no teeth. And this one, we have a boardroom table in our kitchen. It's full. Anyway, when he was 9 months old, he would walk right under the boardroom table. So he did everything early, watching all the other children, and they were thrilled to have him. And my husband, who is not a big meat eater, that night my water broke. It was our anniversary, and he said, I'd like to go out for steak and a movie. And I said, like, I can't go to a restaurant without a stack of towels. And then he said, well, what about a movie? And I said, movie cinemas don't want to see me coming either. So I said, I'll go check in at the hospital and you go rent a movie and bring it, which he did. And it was a horrible movie. And we were only separated by curtains from other couples on the other side. And so I said, you have to turn that off. It was really, really violent. And then my husband says, oh, like Bill. And it was his hockey buddy on the other side of the curtain. And they start talking through the curtain. And anyway, he is so hyper. I had to send him home again to put the children to bed. And by the time he made it back, I was ready to have the baby. I had ripped one of those metal arms off the bed.
Wow.
He came.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I feel a little bit terrified for the upcoming vasectomy that's going to be happening in our family, that hopefully it'll stick a little bit better than yours, but
never say never.
You know, exactly. And I just love the way that you brought this to life, and just as Janelle said, just such incredible humor. So thank you so much again for being here.
You're
for
welcome.
sharing. Congratulations. So the next story we have is She Who Brings Forth the Blossoms, and this is by Leah Timmerman from Maberly, Ontario. And Dr. Michael Klein is going to be back with us now. He was one of our judges, and you all heard him present at the beginning, and he will be introducing this story. So, Dr. Klein.
I think I'm unmuted now.
You are unmuted.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm overwhelmed. As I said earlier, Marshall Klaus was one of my key mentors in my life, and as I was listening to the stories, and of course I read them all before, I remember one of the times that he was interviewed, and he often said this as the most important thing that you needed to know about birth was listen to the mother. And he said it over and over again. And these stories, we could add to that, listen to the mother and encourage her to write it down. So this story, I loved all of the stories, and it was very hard to make choices. And I'll just say a couple of things about it. It's a story about a tomboy who becomes a mother. It's extremely poetic. It involves the seasons, and she manages to carry the story through the seasons. And the birth part of the season is spring. And that's why the blossoms are so important. And you feel that as the blossoms are opening, so is the birth canal opening. And you know, you get to feel that there should be some bees and hummingbirds in the story somewhere, but they're there beneath the surface. All the births so far have been pretty heavy duty, even though they end well in one way or another. But this birth is the kind of birth, it's a terrible expression, that quote unquote women would kill for. I mean, it's transformative, and it's funny as hell. So go ahead.
Yep, hand over the baby.
Bless you all, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah, and thank you for that introduction, Dr. Klein. And thank you all so much for being here. I think as a new mom in this strange world, in this time, navigating my postpartum, I'm really craving connection and stories. And so being here today is something I've been looking forward to for a really long time. So thank you. That's my daughter, Maeve, who's 5 months. She's joining us in the background. She might step out for a minute or two because she's crying. So like Dr. Klein said, my story is called She Who Brings Forth the Blossoms. And it traveled throughout my pregnancy as the seasons progressed. I became pregnant in August. And so I really got to experience our beautiful Canadian seasons as I grew and expanded. I'm actually going to skip all of that part of my birth story and just read a small excerpt at the end where the drama lies, because I thought that might be a bit more exciting. So just to give a bit of context, I live rurally. We're just north of Kingston, about an hour. And so I spent a lot of my early labor actually outside in our yard, wandering around and being outside. And it was in my early labor that I noticed our magnolia tree on our property had its very first pink blossom for the season emerge. And it was only later that I realized and reflected upon the significance of this. So here goes. Things then got interesting. The contractions began to come back to back. I held on for dear life as the most intense pain I had ever felt surged through my body. Eric soon emerged from the bedroom. I felt good that he had come to my side as I was beginning to really need support. He brought me water to sip and a hand to hold. With each contraction, I tried my utmost to relax my muscles and to not clench, but this was very hard to accomplish. The bath was still helping, but it suddenly felt cramped, the water too cold, and the surface hard on my hip bones. I asked Eric to call our good friend Danielle, who was our doula. I felt the need for more hands to squeeze. No sooner had he left the room to make the phone call, did I feel a sensation deep in my pelvis that I can only describe as feeling like two puzzle pieces clicking together. I immediately knew what I was feeling. I gingerly reached a finger inside and confirmed that yes, I was fully dilated and my baby's head was right there. Eric! He called our midwife and told her that things were moving along quickly. My body began pushing hard and I fought it off, panting like a dog. I wanted our midwife and doula to be present so desperately. Knowing that our baby was coming very soon, I turned to my partner and I yelled, "This baby is coming in 10 minutes. You better get ready." I then started barking orders about towels and the bowl for the placenta. Eric deserved a gold medal for how incredibly calm and grounded he was, despite this exciting, nerve-wracking situation. He continued to hold my hand and we made low vocal sounds together. My midwife arrived and set up her equipment. Within 10 minutes of her arrival, our baby's head emerged. It was a burning, fiery ring of satisfaction as I knew my job was almost complete. Our baby's body came next easily and she was born into the tub, into her father's loving hands. She was passed into my arms and I was flooded with emotions and feelings that I will never ever forget. Love, gratitude, relief, and empowerment. It was after about 10 minutes that we realized we hadn't even yet checked our baby's sex, and we cried tears of joy to discover she was a girl. My midwife and my doula helped me waddle over to the bedroom where we tucked into bed with our darling new little sprout. It was midnight and dark and cozy. I felt safe and complete. Days later, our family and friends were eagerly awaiting to learn our baby's name. We both felt that Maeve would make a really nice first name. Lying happily next to her in bed, it came to me so vividly. Maeve Magnolia. Our darling little flower girl, born on the first day of May with the magnolia tree starting its season with the offer of a perfect pink blossom. It was meant to be. Becoming a mother has been a wild ride. At 3 months in, as I type this with one hand, as I hold my daughter with my other, I am happy. There are hard days, hard nights, and tears, but there's also a love and a connection that runs wild and deep. I often think to myself, if I can do that, if I can give birth, I can do anything. And so I have blossomed, firstly as a woman with strong roots and a sense of self, and now as a mother with a sense of purpose and love that I never could have imagined. So thank you, my daughter, Maeve Magnolia. You are she who brings forth the blossoms.
Thank you so much. I remember the first time I read your story, just tears just streaming with I just love the beauty of it and the power of it. And I think it's particularly special that you sort of said at the beginning of sharing your story, just how much you're craving this connection with other people. And there are so many new moms right now who are grappling with so many more, so many other challenges in this COVID moment and being disconnected from people. And so I really do hope that you feel solidarity here and that your story was just so gorgeous and humorous. And I also, I love any story that also, I love the stories where we kind of make fun of partners who are a little bit all over the show, like Susan's a little bit. But, the partners that are just so in there, just right there with you and all of that, and just really showing up and being calm. It's just such a beautiful portrayal. So thank you so much. Did you want to share at all about what it was like to write this story for you?
I'll just say something quickly. Thank you for those words, Laura. It didn't strike me until today, actually, how significant the writing of my story is for me, really. It was something that one of the other storytellers, I think it was Ashley, said about journaling her whole life, and that's something I've always done too. And when I was pregnant, my mother, who's here today as one of the attendees, gave to me her journals that she had written when pregnant and in the early postpartum with me 30 years ago. She gave the journals to me as a gift during my pregnancy. It's probably my most cherished possession. And I've always written as well, and I think I get that from my mom, and I really felt inspired to write down my story so that I could pass it on to my child one day, or so that she could have at least the option to read it. She might not want to read about her mom pooping everywhere, but that's fine.
Likely she'll understand when she gets there. We're having some requests to see Maeve again. Would you be willing? Oh. Is she around? Is she able to come and say hello? And Eric. Hello. So delicious. Just delicious. Yeah. Thank you so much, family, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's really just gorgeous. Okay, so we are now going to turn to another birth story. We've got two left, and they are other just amazing, wonderful stories. So we are going to turn to Worth It, which is by Angela Douglas, and it's going to be read by Chelsea Lutsenko, who is sitting next to me, but you know, you can't quite tell. But we're trying to be cool with that. So I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to introduce the story and then give her the time to speak about it.
Oh, right, switch over. Okay, done. All right, we just had some technical switchovers there. So I would like to start off by saying I am incredibly honored that I can read this story for you, and I'm gonna do my darndest to make my way through it without bursting into tears, because I cry about birth stories constantly, and I would really like to get through this story as much as I can. So I did have to abridge it, so I suggest that you do go online and read the full version, because it is beautiful, but I do have to stick it within a certain amount of time. Okay, so Worth It. I will start this journey by saying that my son was perfect, unscathed, unharmed, and a 9 on the APGAR scale. His birth was not perfect. It was traumatic. Not so much so that it stopped me from doing it again. I gave birth to another happy, healthy child 19 months later, and her birth was wonderful. I had a midwife with the second one, which made all the difference in the world. When I found out that I was pregnant, I was shocked and elated. A few weeks later, I really popped. Shortly after that, I started swelling and having a hard time getting around. I couldn't really explain what the problem was until I was diagnosed with high blood pressure and then preeclampsia. By the time I was 26 weeks pregnant, I had to have weekly stress tests. At 32 weeks, I was told to go on bed rest, but I finally made it to 38 weeks. By the time I was getting ready for my 38-week appointment, and at this point, I was feeling extremely unwell. My face and eyes were swollen, my legs were like tree trunks, and the swelling was causing them to itch. I had a long shower and I headed out the door, with one last look around my apartment, wondering if that was the last time I would ever be alone. I was right. My doctor was good at delivering tough news in an easy manner. Well, Angela, he said, it's time. It's time to go across the street and induce this baby. Normally, I protest everything he says. I take a long time to digest information. Oh, my computer went to sleep. To digest information, I throw up little problems, I discuss details that don't matter, but all I could do was nod. Eventually, my husband and my sister both arrived, my car was handled, and my hospital bag was brought in. I had been induced with the gel. All the gel did was make me feel like I had to have a bowel movement for the next 20 hours, and it caused period-like cramps. I was checked a handful of times and no dilation was happening. Throughout those 20 hours, I was given the gel twice more and was eventually given a Pitocin drip. The next step was to break my water. I was already exhausted. I hadn't slept the night before going to the hospital, and I sure as heck didn't sleep during cramp gate either. I was tired and hungry. They weren't letting me eat, which I later learned was in case I needed surgery. Things were not moving along. I was wrecked and still had to deliver a baby. I was given the option to have an epidural with a water break, and I took it. I had told family and friends, I only want my husband and my sister at the hospital during the birth. But somehow my mom, who lives far away, was in the lobby, and right during the middle of my legs wide open getting my water broken moment, my clueless father-in-law and his wife, who also live far away, waltzed into the room. I was mortified, and they were oblivious. I shot my husband a look, and he quickly ushered them out of the room. Fast forward an hour or so later, and labor is ticking along according to the machines. This was great, except the epidural wasn't working on one side. After more than an hour of that torture, the anesthesiologist came back in and attempted a second epidural. The epidural kicked in and worked, thank goodness, and I fell asleep, hard. I was snoring my face off when in my dream I could feel major pressure down there. like something was coming out. I woke up and felt the pressure again. I looked over to the nurse who had been assigned to monitor me and said, "I think the head is out." She smiled and said, "Oh, I don't think so, sweetie. It's your first baby." And oh, but she lifted the sheet to check and her face changed and so did her tone. "Yep, head's almost there. I'm gonna go grab the doctor now." And away she ran. From the first push to the last, it was only about 20 minutes. Not bad for a first baby, I kept hearing. I reached down and grabbed my boy from them as soon as he came out. He looked perfect. He was big and chubby and well-developed. His eyes were open and he was alert, looking right at me and then all around the room. He was breathing, but he wasn't crying. It was so quiet, stoic, and magical, and I held him for a few moments in awe. The doctors were having a hard time delivering the placenta, and I was trying to push, but nothing was happening. They said I needed to have a manual removal performed or to have surgery. They warned me that they would not be able to top up the epidural as I had already had too much. The manual procedure consisted of something that belongs in a barnyard. I chose to do it anyway because I didn't want to have surgery. Without detail, they attempted more than once. It was very painful and I started feeling weak. I looked at my beautiful baby looking right at me and I didn't notice the chaos around me. Everything was beeping and flashing and people were coming in and out. At some point, I looked at my mom who had entered the room to see us. I could see her tearing up at the sight of her first grandchild, and then I saw the fear in her eyes. I saw others with the same expression. Then I started to feel faint. I was hemorrhaging, and my family was witnessing it all. I was rushed into surgery unconscious. Do you want to keep reading? Okay. I came to in the surgery room with bright lights shining down on me. I was convulsing so much that extra people had to hold my arms. Everything went dark. 5 hours later, I woke up in post-op. I couldn't talk because my throat hurt and the nurses didn't know that I was awake because my eyes were so swollen. Eventually, I got their attention and begged them to take me to my family. They wheeled me up the stairs and spoke casually to me, as though I had just been in there for a haircut. No info about my surgery, just a ride upstairs. Nothing else mattered when I entered that room. My husband was holding my son against his chest, asleep with his finger in his mouth. My baby must have been so hungry. My husband's dad and wife showed up unannounced again. They insisted on holding the baby and posing for pictures without realizing what we had just been through, or that I hadn't held my own son yet, except for that brief moment at birth. I whispered to my husband, and minutes later they were gone, all of them. I told the hubby to go ahead, get some food, get some rest, and I would be fine. I am fine. I wasn't fine at all, but I wanted to be alone. So I held my Johnny, and I promised him that I would never leave him like that again. I bawled like a newborn, which was ironic because he didn't. We spent the next 5 days in the hospital and the next 2 weeks recovering from a major infection due to the procedure. I had subsequent surgeries and pain as a result, and I also suffered from postpartum depression. It was all worth it. I had this wonderful human being in my life, but it took me years to be able to talk about this. In fact, I just read the hospital records earlier this year to try and fill in some holes and get some closure. I almost died. And I now know that my son's life was at risk as well, with the preeclampsia and undiagnosed placenta accretia. I almost died, but I didn't. I was terrified to have another child, but I did. I survived, and I love my life to pieces. I wouldn't change anything now, but I may have gone back in time and found a midwife or a doula to advocate for me. I was so vulnerable during this time in my life. I had no voice until now. Thank you for reading. That was hard. Okay.
You mute yourself.
I don't think.
Yes, I will mute myself now. Okay.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I'm sure Chelsea and my crying was more intense because we're in the same room, so we can just feel each other. And I just want to name how much I wish we could have this in person, but also at the same time with people all over the country joining us. I'm really grateful that we can hold the space for everyone. Angela, this story is so beautiful in how horrifically difficult it must have been, and I'm so grateful that you shared this with us, that you wrote it. I hope that the experience was cathartic in writing it. I don't want to put you on the spot, and you might be a puddle of tears like Chelsea and I are trying to pick ourselves up on the floor. But if you would be willing to say a few words, I think you would have to unmute her. Is that correct? Angela, are you up for saying a few words about anything? What it was like to write this, what it was like to hear it? If you also just want to tell us no, that is fine. But Angela?
Puddle of tears.
I think you're still on mute.
Oh, she's still
see.
muted? Okay, 1 second.
Sorry.
While I'm doing this, I would like to say that even though this was not my birth experience and I did not have those things happen to me, just having a baby in any way just makes you so empathetic, I guess, to anyone's birth experience, because you can see how a little thing in your labor could have changed it and could have made it into something else. So I hope that reading those things just kind of, we should all empathize with each other no matter how our birth story ends.
And I think also, just given this COVID moment, there are so many people who are giving birth in situations where they do not have the support people that they did do everything to have around them, or their situations, where their baby's being taken away from them, and because of maybe they have a fever, or all of these other reasons that are so much more complicated right now. And I have so much empathy, as a girlfriend of mine who I was a doula for a few years back said, anyone who just gave birth during the pandemic said, anyone who's giving birth in the pandemic has major street cred. So, but Angela, are there any words that you would like to share?
I am here. Obviously, I couldn't have read that myself. I did try. I did practice, and it did not happen. And I do have my video covered because you don't want to see.
Understandable.
But yeah, no, it was a very good process. I have wanted to write that for many, many years. My son is 9 now, to give you an idea of how long ago that took place. And even writing it was extremely difficult, clicking send to send it in. But it has been like therapy, pretty much. Closing the loop. I did order my hospital records, and I read through them, and all of the stuff that I didn't remember filled in the holes. So it has been a very difficult but very good experience, and I probably wouldn't have done it if I wasn't prompted by a contest, because of course there's a competitive side in me as well. But yeah, it's been a very good experience. Difficult but good.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm so grateful that you shared this story, and I'm grateful that you allowed Chelsea to read it so that it could be there. And I'm just really grateful, Chelsea, that you let it all be there, because I mean, how do you not read a story like, how do you not read any of these birth stories without having that emotion? But yeah, just thank you, Angela. I really am grateful.
And thanks, Chelsea, for reading
a participant here. So our last, but absolutely not least, final birth story that we will have the pleasure of hearing today is called It All Makes Sense Now. And this is going to be introduced by, is McLean Clark, did she join us? Okay, so McLean was one of our readers, but I am hearing that she is not on. So we have the pleasure of Jose introducing for this last story. Jose?
I wasn't ready for this. Okay, but I did read it. I read them all. So
It All Makes Sense Now by Camille Ramsburger. She's from Ontario. And I think in the story, we definitely feel the power of giving life and the bliss following giving birth. So, and I think it's nice that we have a voice of a single mother. And what thing that really struck me in this story is how determined she was to have a home birth and to birth the way that she wanted. So that's one thing that really struck me, and of course the writing was very nice too. And yeah, that's the story we're going to hear about right now. So back to you, Camille.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to follow. My throat is all closed after that last story, but I'll try to make it through. Okay. So 5 minutes. This is the amount of time I was given to talk about a moment that changed my life forever. But really, that's what it was, a moment. Life is a series of moments that change our lives, some in minor ways, some in major ways. For example, a car accident, or winning the lottery, or simply taking a left turn instead of a right. For me, one of the biggest moments of my life is when I had my son. 1 second I was just me, and the next I was a mom. Of course, most, if not all moms say that their lives change forever when they first held their child in their arms. Now that I have a son of my own, I can understand all those times my mom said, "You'll understand when you have kids." My story is probably like many others, but I like to think that it's unique for several reasons. I had my baby boy at home, and I had him all alone, as planned. I didn't have much of a birth plan, but I knew I wanted to be alone when I had him, as I had been for my entire pregnancy. Not to say that I didn't have support. My family was incredibly supportive from start to finish and beyond. They were just as excited for this baby as I was. What I mean to say was that other than conception, this baby only had me as a parent, and that's how I wanted it to be when he entered the world as well. I had my baby boy at home, in the comfort of my own bedroom, surrounded by 4 walls that I was familiar with, belongings that I was familiar with, my midwife that I had gotten to know over the past several months, and my family waiting just downstairs. Although that sounds lovely, and it was also not all sunshine and rainbows. Labor hurts. It hurts physically, of course, but also takes a toll on you mentally and emotionally. There were so many moments in labor when I cried out, "I can't do this anymore." As though I had a choice at that point, as though someone else could take over for me. Now I'm going to share the ending of my story, the moment where all the pain was already forgotten about, the moment that I want to call the beginning of my life as I know it. The moment that made me unable to understand how I could have ever lived without this little boy in my life before. The moment that I replay in my mind so often that can turn any bad day around and reminds me exactly of life's bigger picture. I looked into his dark brown eyes and I could feel my own start to water. This is my baby. My baby. He's here and he's mine. I lifted the blanket briefly to confirm what I already knew. He's perfect. I still to this day don't believe that something so perfect came out of me. In the background, my midwife was telling me that I needed stitches and that they would sting a bit, and I really could not have cared less. I had my baby in my arms, and that is all I could focus on. Every ounce of pain I had felt, not only in labor, but throughout my entire pregnancy, was worth it and already forgotten about. I would go through it 100 million gazillion times for this little boy, and he would be worth it every time. I don't know what I pictured before I went into labor. I don't really know if I pictured anything or expected anything. I'd never been through it before, so I wasn't sure how it would all play out. What I can say, though, is that everything that happened was exactly aligned with what I would have hoped for. A home birth alone, aside from the midwives, to meet my son for the first time. A perfect, healthy little baby boy to call my own. Before having my baby, I wasn't sure I even wanted kids. Now that I have my sweet little boy in my arms, I don't know how women ever stop. So that is a very, very brief version of the moment that I met Theodore for the first time, 11 months ago to the day. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to share my written story and then to share with all of you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Camille. That was just beautiful. I love that Theodore is there the whole time, just reminding us that he's here. I also really love the way that you speak about the "I can't do this" moment in your labor, because I think as a doula, we see that moment so often. And I think one of the things that in the moment as the birther, you don't always realize is that sometimes is one of the most powerful moments that we witness. You know, we see people say they can't do this. They think they can't while they are, you know, and no one else can do that. As you say, you can't tap someone else in. I remember the first birth I ever went to, you know, the birther in. And no, we can't. And that's part of why the entire experience is so transformative and powerful. So thank you so much for your amazing story and for your power and resilience that you offered in that story, and for having Theodore with us today as well.
Thank you.
Did you want to share at all just a couple of words about what it was like to write the story? Had you written it before this contest, or was it that brought?
No, so I've never been much of a writer. Even in school, I never liked it when I had essays or anything. I never liked it, but after I had him, I didn't want to forget any of it, because it, like, in the moment, everything was so painful and so awful, but afterwards I just looked back and I was just so happy with how everything happened, and I just didn't want to forget any detail of it. So it was all mentally in there, and he was probably 6-7 months old when I saw that there was a contest, and I thought it's still fairly fresh in my mind. I'm gonna write it. And as it was late one night, I'd already put him to bed, I turned on my computer and it just like all flowed out of me. And usually I just get all this writer's block, but as soon as I opened Word on my computer, it just all came out all at once. Less than an hour, I just wrote the whole thing, edited it after, but it just all flowed out, and it was really nice.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's such a beautiful point to end the birth story piece of this, is that like, this is why we have to keep writing birth stories and sharing them and speaking about them, because there is something so powerful about the storytelling of birth when it's really about the authenticity of the experience. You can speak about the pain and all of those other things, but not in the sort of the framework of the fear-based, you know, it's going to be terrible, you know, haha, you're heading into this awful experience, right? There's this really intense authenticity that's beautiful and shows the incredible strength of both givers. So thank you so much for being here with us. So it is my absolute pleasure, as we conclude the birth story piece of this, to segue to an amazing Canadian songwriter and singer, Jen Grant, who has agreed to be with us today to sing a song that is about the birth of her child. So Jen Grant, I wonder if before you sing, if you'd be willing to say a few words about your experience of writing this song and what that was like, and then we would love to hear your beautiful voice. So
Sure.
Jen, welcome.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me. I wrote this song when I was in Nashville. It was a year after I gave birth to my first son, Gus, who is just over there watching just a few minutes of Peppa Pig. He's 22 months old, and my surprised 3-month-old is upstairs. I hadn't written anything about the birth, and I also hadn't done like any co-writing or like trips to Nashville to write with people. You know, I never did that. But there was something about writing with this woman, Robin Delanto. She's a Canadian that lives in Nashville. She's a producer, and we get along really well. And I decided that I wanted to maybe write this song, and I had just kind of stepped out enough of this massive postpartum anxiety and depression that I experienced after my beautiful traumatic birth experience, and that lasted for like 4 months while I toured a record around several countries with my small baby. But I was speaking to Robin about the whole thing, like the whole experience for me of postpartum and of the birth and everything. And as I was telling her, because often when I'm in the past, it's coming up, honey. When I'd be writing it'd be more like stream of consciousness kind of writing. And there was something about talking with Robin. She was like, I was talking about leading up to the birth on the couch, sitting there knitting and all this kind of stuff. And she said, I just want you to write like what the words that you're saying to me right now. And which isn't a style of writing that I am used to, I guess. So anyway, that's kind of my story about writing this song, if that makes sense. And I just felt really liberated. And here we go, guys. Everybody ready? Saturday night. Woo! Gathering around the Zoom. I didn't forget how to be a showgirl. Oh yeah, and it's called Happy Birthday Baby. And I put it out on a little tiny homemade EP called Reimagine EP. I threw stones out into the ocean, making wishes for you just to come on home. I knit 5 whole sweaters on the couch by the window on my own. I was baking shortbread cookies until they had to cut me open at Christmas time. I was listening to Patrick Watson and Gregory Alan Isaac while your heartbeat was dropping, oxygen was on the blue-white sheet was drawn, and scared and stoned and hanging on. I've loved you for so long. Happy birthday, baby. Oh, happy birthday, baby. And I picture you as a young man, climbing trees, chopping wood in the summertime. Find someone, tell them you love them, bring them home and I'll tell them about when your heartbeat was dropping, oxygen was on the blue-white sheet was drawn, and scared and stoned and hanging on. I've loved you for so long. Happy birthday, baby. Oh. Happy birthday, baby. Happy birthday, baby. Oh, happy birthday, baby. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen Grant. Yeah, I've listened to that song many times. My husband was actually the first person to tell me that song was around, but just getting to listen to you in person, or as close as we can get, was
awesome
and awesome. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I really appreciate it. Come and see us.
Hi.
Hey, bud.
Want to say hi? Look. Hi.
What show are you watching?
What show are you watching? Peppa Pig.
That one over there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jen. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. I really enjoyed all the stories.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Am I muted? Okay, I'm good. I just want to wrap up by thanking everyone for making this happen. Jose, our fellow co-founder and doula at DSF, you are the brains, the heart, the everything behind making this happen 2 years in a row, and particularly this year, those of us with tiny children kind of just dropped off the face of the planet when the pandemic started, and you kept making this happen. So just thank you so much. Both years, I know that this sharing circle is going to be amazing, and then it happens, and there's like new spaces opened up in me, and I feel exhilarated and excited and just so moved and connected to people. So thank you, Jose, for making this happen. I'm just really grateful. And thank you, Chelsea, for doing all of this other person in the room, for doing the various moderating and managing all the technology. I'm really, really grateful to you, our chairperson of the Doula Support Foundation, and a dear friend as well. To all the birth story writers, just thank you for being here, for writing your stories, for just sharing. Thank you. Keep sharing your stories. Keep encouraging other people to write their stories. We will be having this contest as long as Jose can make it happen. And I hope that's many, many years to come. So please keep doing the amazing work that you're doing and changing the birth culture to something that's more positive and speaks to the power and resilience of birth givers. To all of the judges, you gave a lot of time and energy and thought and wisdom to this process, and I'm just really grateful for all of that. And if you want to be judges again for next year, or if anyone who's on this is considering wanting to be a judge for next year, please do reach out and let us know. It's an incredible process to read. I think we got, how many? We got 33 stories in total, is that right? For this year, I think we had 33 stories in total. So yeah, just an amazing selection of stories. And Jen Grant, again, thank you so much for coming and joining us in this little Kingston, Ontario Doula Support Foundation that is trying to be, to connect other Canadians and other people elsewhere around birth stories. Jose, was there any final words that you wanted to say, or?
Just want to thank everybody, and I think this was a wonderful event. I'm really happy that everybody came with their heart open. And for next year, if anybody wants to volunteer, you send me an email. We need people to make this happen. So, but I'm very, very pleased with. I'm so happy. I'm so happy about this event. Thank you, everybody, for this.
May I make a brief comment?
This is just amazing. So thank you to everyone. If you didn't have a chance to read all of the stories, please go to our doulasupport.org website. You can check out the birth stories that are available now, and there'll be another story published each week until Christmas. I think that's right. If you are able to give anything to the Doula Support Foundation to help us continue to serve our community in terms of doula support and childbirth education, we would be grateful for that, or just to share information with anyone who does have some money right now. We will happily take that. Thank you everyone so much. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday evening, and thank you for being with us here today. Bye.